Hi again, and welcome to the Talkingbass Podcast. This week, I'll be talking bass with the ridiculously talented YouTube sensation, Charles Berthoud. Charles is most well known for his incredible solo bass playing skills. He makes use of every technique imaginable, from tapping to slapping to harmonics and everything in between, while creating stunning pieces that not only showcase his world-class virtuosity, but also his great sense of musicality. Since 2019, Charles has become a major YouTube star after his collaborations with Davey504, and he's built a devoted following of over 1.5 million subscribers, many of which don't even play bass, proving that with the correct combination of instrumental skills and presentation, even solo electric bass can appeal to a mass audience. So, without further ado, here's the insanely talented Charles Berthoud. So, I want to start with you right at the beginning, because there's loads to talk to you about. But you now live in the States, but you're originally from England. So how did everything start for you? So, if you go right the way back.
Well, the very first music-related experiences I had were playing piano, which I started playing piano when I was about 7. Just kind of the classic, parents want you to play a musical instrument. It's kind of a good thing to learn when you're young. But I did enjoy it. I know a lot of people kind of hate being forced to learn an instrument, but it's I did actually quite enjoy the practicing and getting the feeling of improving and being able to play music. And then it was probably, I didn't really start listening to music properly until I was about 11 or 12, and it started off with kind of like hard rock and metal. Actually, the first band I really loved was Metallica. I was obsessed with them. I went to my first Metallica concert when I was 13. Went to Download Festival. Do you know? I'm assuming you know. Yeah. Which was really cool, especially when we were that young.
Which year was it?
I think it was 2006.
Right.
Because then I would have been 14. Yeah, it was around 2006. Mm-hmm. It was Metallica, and I remember Trivium, Avenged Sevenfold, and Korn were all playing as well. It's a good lineup. I got really into Metallica and Muse and Guns N' Roses, AC/DC, Led Zeppelin, a lot of kind of old rock and metal and some slightly newer stuff. And that's around the time I started playing bass, so when I was about 12. It's just basically just playing in a band with my friends. We would just play covers by all those bands, and we would play at just school concerts sometimes, or sometimes at the local venues. And I loved playing bass. There weren't many other people in my school playing bass. They all played guitar and drums and stuff like that. So I was kind of unique in that way. And then when I started getting into the more solo stuff was when I was about 18, 19. I discovered Victor Wooten. Amazing Grace was the first video I saw from him, and it just blew my mind. I'd never seen anyone play bass even remotely anything like that. And so that's when I realized that bass could also be a really cool solo instrument. And I sort of started focusing a bit more on that after I discovered Victor. And then Berkeley, I was just basically taking that, just going crazy with it. I was practicing like crazy at Berkeley, maybe 5 or 6 hours a day most days. And a lot of solo stuff, but also a lot of transcribing bass lines from Jameson and even old jazz greats like Paul Chambers, Ron Carter, and then Marcus Miller, Jacko, all of that kind of stuff.
So you started out, it was mainly rock and metal influences to begin with, and then you sort of graduated into, well, not graduated, that's the wrong word, it moved into all that stuff. It's very, very similar to the way that you described it is very, very similar to my path through all that, because I started out with all metal and everything back in the early 90s, and then all of the other stuff came from the music college thing. So obviously when you went to Berklee, because, I mean, there's no getting around it. As soon as you go to music college, you get thrown into jazz and you get thrown into all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So were you into Victor Wooten before you went to Berklee?
Yeah, probably like a couple of years before I went, I discovered Victor. Yeah.
Had you heard the Show of Hands album at that point?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, I remember hearing that for the first time. Everybody kept telling me about Victor Wooten, because like back in those days, there was no like YouTube or anything back in the 90s. So I was massively into Stu Hamm and Billy Sheehan and all those kind of guys. But I kept hearing about this Victor Wooten guy, and he was always in Bass Player magazine. But I never really heard him because it wasn't like, YouTube or anything like that. And I just remember hearing that album for the first time and thinking, what the? It's just ridiculous.
Especially the title track, A Show of Hands. I'm just like, what is even happening on this song?
Yeah. I mean, did you try classical thump early on?
Pretty early, yeah. I tried classical thump, You Can't Hold No Groove, and Amazing Grace. And all of them, I could basically play the notes, but my feel was just nothing. It was like, it didn't feel that good. It wasn't that nice to actually listen to, even though I was like basically playing all the right notes, because it's just such a different technique to what most bass players are used to. Like I'd only really done fingerstyle and slap, like a bit of like flea style slap up until that point. So trying to play something like Can't Hold No Groove, it's all about the feel. It's like if you don't have the feel, it just doesn't sound anything like the way he plays it. Yeah,
and it's so hard to figure out what he's playing. I found that was my main. I mean, because it was so beyond me at the time, because and now I just never practiced that kind of stuff. But I remember thinking, how am I going to learn this stuff? Because it was like you just can't. A lot of it you can. I mean, some of it you can. Some of it you can kind of tell what's going on, but. Man, some of it is so difficult to work out. I mean, were you transcribing it yourself, or were you looking at tabs and things like that?
Well, he actually has a tab book. So Victor, and I think he actually transcribed it himself.
Yeah.
I did that. I wasn't really transcribing much back when I was like 17, 18. And that tab book is really good. Obviously, it's really accurate because he transcribed it. But even then, it's just like, that's why YouTube is so helpful, because then you can like really watch his hands and how he's doing it. Because basically in the tabs, you can only really just be like, okay, he's using his thumb here, he's popping here and he's popping here, but you can't even really figure out like which finger he's using to pop and like how he's managing to do it so efficiently and all that kind of thing. So that, I think if I'd had YouTube back then, I mean, I guess YouTube was around, but it just wasn't like, you didn't have these like in-depth tutorials you have and stuff like you do now. So I think maybe I would have got the feel a bit more back then, but because I was just like reading it off of tabs and stuff, it's just, I could play the notes, but it just didn't really sound like Victor or anything that funky or groovy.
Well, it's like the angle of the hand and the just all the little things, because it took me forever to. I mean, I'm still terrible at double thumbing, but it's like just the actual motion of it. Like when I first tried doing that, I was like, it just hurt for a start, because the instinctive thing is to kind of do it all with the edge of your thumb, which obviously is, well, I mean, you can try, but you're going to get blisters. But like knowing that it's a little bit of nail on the upstroke and all those kind of things, you just never know that that's going to be the thing. So that I've got that book actually, but that was never out when I was younger and trying to do it. So I just had no idea. So that's good. Were there any other of the? Because I mean, obviously, you're known mainly for all of the tapping, slapping, the typical Wooten type things, the more advanced techniques. Were there any other guys that were like really influential with that stuff?
Marcus Miller was definitely a big one. Especially, I love the way that he's got all of this production, and then he like slaps, or I guess he's slapping most of the time. It's so different from how most people slap though, because he's like not really doing octaves and stuff. Like he's often just playing melodies, and he's like popping most of it. But I love how he does that, and it's like, because Victor, a lot of his stuff is like completely solo, whereas Marcus, it's often like he's got this really good production behind it as well, and it's like he's just playing the melody on top a lot of the time. So yeah, Marcus is a big influence. Earlier on, Flea was definitely a big influence in my slapping. And then Michael Manring is definitely a big solo bass influence.
Yeah, because you've got detuners, haven't you, on every string, which I guess is a Manring influence.
Yeah, and actually, it's a little bit also at Berkeley. My teacher was Jim Stinnett, and his son Grant Stinnett was also really influenced by Michael Manring, and he has the same bass that I have with detuners, and he uses Piccolo Strings. So yeah, that is all kind of stemming from Manring.
So what year did you start at Berkeley?
2012.
Right.
Yeah.
And I guess that's where you met Jim Stinnett.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm guessing that he was, because I've seen videos with you both on YouTube before, and unfortunately, as a lot of us know, he died. Was it last year that Jim died? Was it the year?
It feels
before?
longer. I think it might have been 2 years now.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm guessing that you were pretty close with Jim through all of that time. It seems so on the videos. Was Jim quite a big influence on you through that time?
Yeah, definitely a very, very big influence. But I mean, basically, he was my private teacher. So, like at Berkeley, you've got your classes, and then you've also got your private bass lessons. He was my private bass teacher throughout my entire time at Berkeley, and even after Berkeley for a couple of years, I took lessons with him. And yeah, he was a very big influence, mostly just in like kind of my mindset, the way I approach practicing and my goals and things like that. He was very much kind of like encouraging people, all of his students, to just really like go all out, just go for it. Don't worry about like whether you're going to succeed or things like that. Just if this is what you want to do, just practice as much as you can, try and improve as much as you can, especially while you're in Berkeley, and like this is an opportunity you're never going to have again, where basically that's all you're supposed to do. It's just improve and get better. So he definitely influenced me a lot in that aspect.
Did Jim do any tapping or slapping or any of that stuff? Because it's not the kind of stuff that I always think of Jim Stinnett as doing. But I knew Grant did all of that stuff as well. So I'm like, is Jim creating all these guys that do this amazing stuff? Was he into that stuff?
So I think basically, when he was a professional bassist back in, I guess, the 70s or 80s? Yeah, quite a while ago. Back then, tapping and slapping, people weren't doing it quite as much, especially tapping, I think. So basically, it's not really something that he ever practiced loads and became like a master of tapping or something. Like, he was very much more like a jazz bassist. But he did really like it. Like, he likes anything that's, expanding the boundaries of bass. So yeah, he encouraged us to do it, basically. Like, even though he wasn't necessarily a master of it himself, like, he saw that we were into it. And obviously just basses themselves have changed a lot. Like, back in the 70s, a lot of basses weren't really set up that well for tapping and slapping, but now you can do quite a lot more in terms of technique. So he saw that as well and just encouraged us to do it, and saw that we were really enjoying it.
Were there any particular exercises that you worked on at that point, with the tapping stuff?
Yeah, definitely. So one thing that he got, his kind of thing that he loved to do with exercises was doing it around the cycle of fourths. Like he would always, one of the first fingerstyle exercises I did with him was just major scales around the cycle of fourths, just like one octave major scales and alternating fingers. And that's what I did with tapping as well. I just, like one of the first exercises I did was just tapping major scales around the cycle of fourths, an octave apart within each hand. And at first I'd do that for like an hour or two every day and just try to like keep my movements as efficient as possible. So yeah, that was one of the big exercises. He also had a whole book of etudes that he wrote. It's called 12 Keys to Success. And I think they were written for fingerstyle in mind, but he just told me to like tap as many of them as I could. Yeah.
So basically, it was, and I think that, I know where you're going with this, and I think this is for anybody out there that's wanting to do tapping. I think what you're getting at is that you were trying to, instead of just play tapping like in the percussive way, because there's no way around it. When you first start tapping, it ends up becoming so percussive. Everything becomes monotonal and but to be really musical with it, you really have to try and play things as if you were almost finger picking them, to actually have dynamics and to have a certain amount of musicality, which I hear in your playing all the time. It's probably the thing that stands out the most is the dynamics and the actual musicality. So I'm guessing that as you played all those, you were trying to maybe even stop the percussive kind of hammer, 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 hammer piano kind of thing and try and make it sound more like it would if you were finger picking it.
Yeah, definitely. I think earlier on, it was actually a lot of, basically, a lot of tapping is kind of like, I'm trying to think of an example, but it's the kind where it's like hammer, pull off, just like on one string and just playing like really fast triplets or something on one string.
Yeah.
Which
Van Halen style.
Yeah, exactly. Which is like, that's a really cool sound. It's a really cool thing to do. But if that's the only thing you can do with tapping, then it gets repetitive pretty quickly. So basically the exercise that we were doing, it was trying to get me the ability to use tapping in a way where I could play basically just anything, like almost just like a piano arrangement. Like I could be playing a melody in my right hand and then like accompanying it in my left hand. So it doesn't just have to be like this monophonic line on top of other stuff. Like it can actually be a technique you can use to play a full arrangement. And then adding dynamics and articulation and stuff like that, that's something that came about pretty naturally just through playing it over and over, just tapping over and over again and then kind of listening back and being like, all right, it sounds nice, but it still doesn't sound like as expressive as it could be. Why is that? And then be like, oh, well, other instruments, not tapping, they're putting all these little like slides in here and there, and that's then you realize that you've got to do that with tapping as well. Obviously, like this, it's no different.
And did you start from the very start? Were you using all four fingers of the tapping hand?
Yeah, basically. Yeah, because when I would do the scales at the very beginning, it would be one finger per fret, which ends up using all your fingers. Yeah. Yeah.
So you were basically mimicking that hand with that hand, working up in that way.
Yeah. So yeah, the pinky fingers are obviously terrible at first, especially on your right hand. Like that, it takes a while to get that to feel natural.
Yeah, my first exposure to that was Stu Ham's Slap, Pop and Tap for Bass VHS tape that I had back in the early 90s. And he goes through a lot of that stuff, trying to do the typical contrapuntal stuff. And I just remember thinking, it was a bit like the Victor Wooten moment where I was like, well, I'm not going to be able to do this. And it was doing it. It was just like, as soon as you get onto that pinky, as you're trying to, if you tap and you hammer like quite hard, you can do it even with fairly weak fingers. But it's trying to make it musical and actually not have it overplay. That I always find that's the hard thing. When you're first starting out with it, it's a nightmare.
Yeah, no, it is definitely tough. And yeah, with tapping in general, it's hard. You need to be really conscious of not making it like painful for the listener. Especially like especially if you're doing like 3 minutes of tapping, like a 3-minute song that's all tapping. Like, yeah, you've really got to make sure that you're not just like pounding the listener with like clicky, tappy sound the whole time. Yeah, I mean, often that's why I often mix up the techniques. Like often my stuff isn't just fully tapping because it can get a little repetitive if that's all you're doing. Yeah,
because you'll switch between slapping and tapping and harmonics and slides and fingerstyle and stuff quite a lot. I mean, I think out of everybody that I've ever seen, I think you have more fluency between techniques in both hands than I think anybody I've ever seen. It's because you'll shift between like everything, like within a single bar, like moving from this to that to this to that. And the thing that I think, because I saw you long before but I'll get into it later. But the Davey 5, when Davey 504 and all that, and you did the Pro and all that kind of thing. But long before that, I'd actually seen you quite a bit of you, because for people out there that have only seen the new stuff, there is actually quite a lot of you from before. There's a lot of playing there online, and I'd seen a lot of you before, and. It was the main thing that I was looking at. I was thinking, man, the fluency, because it's the musicality. It's actually the shifting between them, and it's not like an exercise, because it's dead easy for things like that to just sound like some kind of exercise. But there's actual melodies in it, and it's it's with purpose, which I think is the most impressive thing.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I'm always trying to be musical because I know how easy it is to fall into the trap of just doing stuff for the sake of being flashy or technical. And obviously there's a time and place for that. Sometimes it is kind of fun just to watch something crazy fast, but you can't only do that. Like it gets boring after a while.
Which leads us into roughly around, was it 2019, I think, when you suddenly went, well, what's the word? Viral, I guess, when it all went crazy. So the first thing that happened, obviously, was that you were featured on Davey 504's channel. And so how did that come about?
So basically, I'm on Fiverr. Do you know the website Fiverr?
Yes.
So for anyone who doesn't know, it's just like a freelance website, and some of those freelancers are musicians. So yeah, I was on there. I would record bass lines for anyone who needs a bass line for their song. Doesn't matter where they are in the world. It's all remote. And, I'd been on there for maybe a few years at that point and just done generic, just some projects here and there, nothing like crazy, nothing that was on the charts or whatever. But basically one day I got an order from this guy whose username was not Davey504, which is pretty funny because I knew of Davey, like I'd seen his videos on YouTube and stuff, and I knew he was really popular. So I saw this username and I was like, okay, well this has to be Davey, and because especially I got this order out of nowhere, and the only thing it said was, "Hi, can you play the best bass solo ever?" And there was extra points if you can use as many techniques as possible or something like that. I said, yeah, sure. And he wanted there to be a video with it as well. So I was like, okay, so he's probably going to do a video. I'm probably going to be in this video where he's hired a load of people on Fiverr. So I went really all out. I tried to make it as good as possible because I knew it would probably get seen by a lot of people. And then, I did it. He uploaded his video. And it got loads of views And then it turned into this whole thing where he was like, he kept hiring me for these videos where he like came up with all these nicknames for people where like I was the pro, and then there was like 69 guy, there's like triple camera guy. Like he just created this whole little like, I don't know, these little like battles and stuff. And then finally, I guess a lot of people were commenting on these videos, you know, saying like, oh, you got to battle the pro or whatever, or like you got to do a collab with him. So then he just asked if I wanted to do a battle, and yeah, that's the rest is history.
Yeah, because you know, like I say, I'd seen you quite a bit before that. So when you did that, I was like, "Oh, this is going to be good," because I knew what you could do. Because when it first came on, because I saw that video and he was doing the fiver thing, and I was like thinking, okay, well, you know, the typical. I didn't expect to see you on there. I was thinking, oh, he's going to get some, you know, I mean, great bass players or whatever, but you know, like just general freelance people doing them. And then you popped up, and I thought, oh, here we go. This is going to be funny. So yeah, so that happened, and then of course your own channel blew up because of it. So that you know, that went crazy, and. You know, and it's how many subscribers have you got now? Is it about 2 million, something like that?
It's 1.5.
1.5, yeah. So it's got big, and I'm guessing that, you know, when you start especially when you have that sudden boost of subscribers, that you're going to get a certain amount of, you know. Well, I mean, a lot of them are not going to be bass players at all. You know, there's going to be a lot of people that are just watching that are non-bass players. But I'm guessing that there's, just as with everything, I mean, even I get haters and like people saying stuff. So when you get to that kind of number, I can imagine that some of the comments and some of the things that people say are a little bit odd at times. I mean, what's that been like?
Yeah, I mean, I do think I don't get as many hate comments as a lot of people. Like I obviously do get some, and yeah, it's been interesting. I think it was actually worse right around when I was first starting to like get bigger on YouTube. Was, you know, right after all the Davey stuff had happened, because basically around then I was getting a lot more comments of being like, oh, you're just copying Davey, or like, oh, you're only big because of Davey and stuff like that. Yeah. And obviously, I don't get nearly as many comments like that anymore because it's just a lot less easy to justify that now because I've like been doing it for 3 years. It's been a long time since I've done anything with Davey. But basically, yeah, now I don't get too much. I you know, every bassist who does sort of technically advanced stuff gets some hate for not just playing bass lines, basically. And like, I know that makes me sound like I think I'm like amazingly technically advanced or whatever, but it's just the facts. It's just like, for some reason, there are some people who just want bassists to like only play simple stuff. And you know, a lot of the time, simple bass lines are what works for the song. It's just that a really crazy slap solo can also sound amazing. Yeah. Or a really intricate tapping arrangement can sound really beautiful. Like it's not like because bass in pop sounds really good when it's simple, that's all you're allowed to do on bass.
Yeah. And, you know, the number of times that I've had this argument with people about that kind of thing, where they'll say, you know, oh, you can do all that. I don't mean necessarily at me. I just mean in general, you know, with people, where it's about playing, like you said, it doesn't even have to be technically advanced, to be honest. It can be something that's just not a stereotypical bass line. You know, you play a melody, you could play Bar Bar Black Sheep, and they'd probably be saying, oh, well, that's above the 12th fret. What you doing up there? You know, you played that. Yeah. But the people that hate on that, I often think, well, do you think that this person can't play a regular bass line? You know,
right?
It's like they can't play December 63, something like that. Do they think that that's not... I in a similar way, I kind of had a similar kind of thing where I did this classical piece called Solfeggietto. I did it as a Facebook thing, like on the, learning it on a live stream and all that kind of stuff. And it's... it sounded pretty nice. I quite liked it. And, it was just a basic transcription of the thing. And then ended up putting it out as like a thing to do with the channel, with the website. And it went out as like just a Facebook. It went out as a Facebook ad for the actual Facebook page, basically to just, bring some people to the Facebook page. But the problem was I kind of sent it out to the whole world. I didn't realize that it was going to be going out to, like, when you can set these things, I didn't realize they were putting it out to everywhere. And so, of course, it was just seen by so many people. And, of course, there was for all the nice things that people say, like they do, there were so many people that were, that didn't know anything. All they see is what that is. And they just think that is all you can do. And that, 99% of anything that most bass players are going to do in a regular bass playing is play basic bass lines. But then for some reason, when you end up playing something that's out, a little bit more... either a classical piece or a tapping piece or whatever it is, and then, and they all come out of the woodwork. But I don't know. I hate to use the term, because the standard thing people say is, it's jealousy. I don't even think it's jealousy. I think that's actually being almost like disrespectful to those people. I just think it's just a bit different, and people just aren't used to it. They just, they just associate it with, bands that they like, and then of course as soon as somebody like you puts out some crazy woo, they think, but can he play this? It's really odd how that works.
It is. It's really interesting. But yeah, I mean, luckily that's only a very small percentage of the comments that I get. Most people are really supportive, and I do think a lot of people just enjoy seeing something that's like completely unexpected. I think that's one of the cool things about the internet is like often it's the really unexpected stuff that goes viral. And that's there's obviously bad things about the internet too, but I think that's one of the cool things is that all of these new interesting things that maybe would never have been shown on TV back in the day, like how many solo bassists are on like national TV or major TV channels. That's the kind of opportunities that the internet has.
But it's also just basically entertaining. I mean, your channel is entertaining. It's funny. There's all aspects of entertainment in it, which I think is, which is why I think obviously I've seen a lot of the comments that you have, certainly over the last year, have been incredibly complimentary. I mean, it's absolutely chocker full of people just being, gushing over it, like, wow, which must be great. And so, I mean, you have that, but I think I think for most people, just the entertainment factor is probably key to all of that. Because if you were doing stuff that was like, classical Thump, let's say, and you're doing a cover of that, but it didn't have the entertainment factor, it'd be a little bit like, oh, that's great, and move on. But I think the reason people come back is probably because of the entertainment factor.
Yeah, I think definitely. I think on any internet stuff, it's important to have that. And that's also what kind of draws people in who aren't necessarily bassists themselves. Because I think, if you do something that's really... especially technical stuff, but even, really musical stuff, I think sometimes, it might not necessarily appeal to non-musicians, but if you can add in some of that entertainment factor, it definitely, more people can enjoy it, basically.
Well, I think the fact that you're appealing to a non-bass playing audience is something in itself, because if you'd have said in the 1990s or the early 2000s that someone like Victor Wooten, for instance, that he could have a mass appeal on YouTube. I mean, I know he's got mass appeal amongst us bass players, but to
Yeah.
have mass appeal to a non-bass playing audience is pretty special. I mean, that's pretty good stuff, because I'd have never thought that could happen at all. But you've obviously cracked the code with that one, so well done.
Thanks. Yeah, no, it's definitely another advantage of the internet, I would say, is it's like now you can really find your niche, and because people can choose whatever they want to watch now. It's not just they have to watch whatever gets shown to them. So now you can really like get popular in your niche, and I guess even like you said, a little bit outside of your niche too, but people can find things that they would never have found before, and if it's entertaining, then they'll just keep coming back.
Yeah. And do you do all the video editing and all of that stuff yourself?
Yeah, I do.
Wow.
There's occasionally when I do more professional looking music videos, I don't do the editing for that. But yeah, all of the stuff that's just like in this room, that's all edited by me. Yeah,
that's impressive, because it's there's a lot of. How many video cameras do you have set up for that then? It's not just one, is it?
The way I actually do it, I film the main take from the front, and then I actually just film it again from different angles.
Oh, right. Okay.
It probably saved time. I had more cameras.
Yeah.
So I'll probably get some more at some point, but at the moment, that's how I do it.
Oh, that's a good. Well, that's actually a good way of doing it. I kind of had this vision of you having like about 3 or 4 cameras all over the place, like an octopus of cameras, like observing.
I should do that.
Yeah. And who does the? Do you do the thumbnails?
Actually, most of the thumbnails are done by my wife.
Right.
She did painting in college, and she's good with Photoshop. So yeah, she mostly does them.
Yeah, they're fantastic. I mean, you've really cracked that. I mean, that's almost like a masterclass in YouTube thumbnailery. In terms of
it's
getting
really
people
interesting. It's really interesting what works for thumbnails. It kind of changes. Like when it first started, I remember Davey was doing these like crazy thumbnails that were like really edited, and there's a lot of like there's always like an arrow pointing at something with some text and stuff like that. It seems like now there's been a little bit of a shift towards having thumbnails be a little bit more representative of the actual video. Like it's almost like people want to get a little glimpse of the video, so they like know what they're getting themselves into or something like that. Like I've found that the really edited thumbnails actually don't work quite as well as they used to.
Yeah.
So it's weird. This is one of the things about YouTube and all the platforms, is that everything's constantly changing. So the second you think you've like cracked the code, it changes.
yeah. And it has changed a lot. And I mean, it's like I started talking bass about 10 years ago. Well, it's 10 years ago this year. And when it started, like when I started the channel, I mean, YouTube had been out quite a while, but it was still in its infancy in terms of the way that it's gone, because back then thumbnails, you really didn't have to think about it that much. I mean, it was like just put up anything. It was the Wild West with all that stuff. Me and Scott Devine, that does Scott's Bass Lessons, me and him, we were about the same time. We're good friends, and who else was there? Marlo DK was around. Yannick was still doing stuff around it at that point. But it was like you didn't really have to concentrate on any of that stuff. And now it's a science. I mean, all you got to do is look around at lessons on this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of it has become more of a science. It's like, because there's so many people doing it now, and it's like a lot more monetized. I think people are getting really like strategic. They're really like trying to optimize their videos and their thumbnails to make them as engaging as possible. So yeah, when I had no idea how much effort you had to put into thumbnails until like when all the Davey stuff started happening and I like was taking it more seriously, I just realized, so the reason I used to get like really not many views, probably part of that was because I put like zero effort into my thumbnails.
Yeah, and titles, there's a little psychology behind the title. I mean, that's what it is. It's basically a study in psychology.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I think what you said though about how they've changed over time. I think now I think people are becoming a little bit more hypersensitive to clickbait, aren't they? So they kind of see things and they think, mind you, they'll still click because it does work. There is that psychological thing. But I think a lot of those incredibly bright things that were really big a couple of years ago still work with kids, because my kids watch all these things and I can tell what they're looking for. I can see them clicking on things. And I think it still works really well with those. But I think as it gets a little bit, as the age range gets a little bit older, then it's less effective with the the bright colours, the contrast, and all that kind of thing. So I think you're right. I think that started to shift a little bit.
Yeah, I think you've got to. It's almost like you've got to be more clever with the clickbait now. Basically,
yeah.
It's like
because it's everywhere.
Exactly, and like I think back when YouTube was a bit of a newer platform, there were these techniques that were very new, and people weren't as sort of jaded with the classic clickbait techniques, like gone wrong, or just like any of those like little phrases you could throw in that used to just like boost your views. I think everyone just knows what they are now, so when they see them, they're like, okay, I know he's just trying to clickbait me.
Yeah. So how do you come up with the ideas every week? Because I mean, you're pretty consistent with all of this stuff, and I was just going back over your channel this morning, looking at stuff, and I'm like, man, he gets these new solo pieces out pretty damn quick. So how do you do this in terms of, coming up with ideas and then scheduling them? Like, are you working like a month in advance, knowing what you're going to do, or is it just like, oh right, I better do something today?
I have a huge list of possible videos, but I don't have a video, like I haven't even started working on my next video yet, let's put it that way. So basically I'm not like some people who have like a 2-month backlog of videos, and like the video they're making right now is going to be released in 2 months time. Like that's not what I do. I'm always just making the next video. Although I've got like, sometimes I work on longer term compositions where I'm like, okay, this song will probably come out in a month or something. But even then, I'll film the video like a couple of days before I release it. But basically, I mean, yeah, I kind of like being a little bit spontaneous. I often get, there have been times in the past where I'll get like loads of comments requesting a certain song or certain, I don't know, using a bow on my bass or whatever. And like, it's nice to be able to react really quickly to those, because sometimes otherwise the interest just dies. And if everyone wants something now and then you release it 2 months later, it might not necessarily do that well. Yeah. So yeah, it does make things a little more stressful, though, I'll say. Because sometimes I'm like, oh god, I've got to like come up with a video idea and then like write a song and then record it and film it and release it in like the next 3 days. Like, so sometimes that can get kind of stressful, but that's just part of it. It's just part of the experience.
Do you ever just think, I can't think of anything for this time? Screw it, I'm just going to go for the weirdest, wackiest thing that I'm going to put my bass amp in ice. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to stick it in ice.
Yeah, definitely. That sometimes happens. It can get stressful. That is one of the things. That's one of the hardest things about YouTube, is just because it relies so much on, are people going to click on this video and things like that. It kind of does force you to like do something a little bit crazy almost every time. Like if I put up a video that's just a thumbnail of like me with my bass and I just title it like bass solo, it's just the problem with YouTube is that it's just going to stop showing it to people. Like it's not a platform.
Yeah.
The fact that I have 1.5 million subscribers doesn't mean 1.5 million people are even going to like see it appear on their page, let alone watch it. So it does kind of force you to like do crazy stuff, which is kind of fun in a way, but also stressful because it's like I can't just be like, all right, I'm just going to throw up a bass solo and expect that many of my subscribers to actually see it because of how the algorithm works.
That's another thing that's changed on YouTube. It used to be that your subscriber count actually meant something. It was like, because it had really, I mean, there were less ways for it to be distributed to people or presented to people. But nowadays, that subscriber count, it doesn't really amount to much. I mean, it helps obviously because it knows that, you know, this person's going to be into bass videos, but like you say, it's more about individual videos, isn't it? Actually, you know, it pushing those individual ones.
Yeah, subscriber count. So obviously there is still a subscription feed that people can go and watch, but that probably usually only accounts for maybe like 10% of the views of a video. So basically, it essentially is just a number that shows how many people have like expressed interest in your channel, rather than how many people you'll actually be reaching with every video.
Yeah, it's a much lower percentage than I think people realise. When you look at the analytics, you always look at that amount that your subscribers are watching, and you think, oh man, there's, you know, come on, please, like push it a bit more, you know, to the actual people that have subscribed. But do you spend much time looking at your analytics on the vids?
I spend a decent amount. I don't spend as much as I used to, because when it was first blowing up, I don't know, I found it fascinating. Basically, it was just like I'd release a video and then I'd spend like a few hours the next day just like checking the analytics, being like, oh my god, look at all these people watching. You've really got to be careful though, because it can start to like mentally mess with you a bit if you get too obsessed. Because basically, the way YouTube presents analytics to you, it's it presents it in a very sort of competitive way, where like all your videos are ranked against each other, and it shows you whether your videos are like, whether your overall views are like trending downwards, and then, you know, that can get really scary. And the problem is if you get too focused on it, because you don't have ultimate control over how many people watch your videos. You can make your videos as great as possible and the thumbnails and all that, but at the end of the day, there's so much that's also just left to chance that it can be really depressing to just focus too much on the views, and it can sometimes make you forget that you're actually supposed to be enjoying this, you know, and not just it's like, at the end of the day, it's about playing the music and enjoying the music. It's not really about the views. So I definitely don't check it as much as I used to, but I still do, just more for just sort of research purposes, just be like, oh, okay, so for some reason this video didn't do well, or like, oh, okay, for some reason, because you got like the engagement graph, so you can see like, oh, for some reason they dropped off at this point, or oh, they really loved this part. That's interesting. Like that's the kind of things I look for now in my analytics.
It can become really addictive, and you can become obsessive with that kind of stuff as well. I mean, I know I've gone through sort of phases where, and sometimes it can be really, like you say, almost mentally taxing, because you end up seeing, it's all right if everything's going well and you've got positive, movement, but the minute that it flatlines or it goes down, and then you start questioning yourself what you're doing wrong and all this kind of thing, it's just really, I mean, it's great for you because you're on that, you're flying at the moment, but it can be a little bit, I find it, I try not to look at them too much these days.
Yeah, and you also, sometimes you just can't read too much into it, because it really is just sometimes random. Like, obviously you should try and learn what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. But there have definitely been times where my views have have dipped, but it hasn't been because my content's got worse. It's just because I had just had like a little viral moment where for some reason I was getting shown to a lot of new people, and now those new people, I'm less of a novelty to them, so they're not watching as much. So now I'm like in a little bit of a dip, but it feels like, oh my God, what am I doing wrong? My views are going down. Like if you read too much into it, you can really like freak yourself out sometimes.
Yeah. One of the things that I've noticed with your vids is that you use a lot of different, well, I was just going to say gear, but it's, it is different gear, but I mean, sometimes it's shoelaces instead of strings and things like that. But, is the LaFay bass that you've got, is that your main bass?
Yeah, the black LaFay, that is definitely my main one, yeah.
Yeah, and that's got you've got detuners on every string out on that one, I think, have you?
I do. Yeah, the black one. Yeah, that's my main one. It's just I like the feel of a 4-string. It's really versatile. It sounds great in slap, tap, finger style. I've been playing my 6-string Schecter a lot recently as well. That is really good for. It's actually surprisingly good for sort of prog metal, that kind of stuff, because it really helps to have, well, the low B is pretty essential in metal, but also it's really helpful to have the 6th string as well, because some of the really fast stuff is on a 4-string, you're just having to fly around the neck so much. It's nicer to just sometimes move up and down a little bit instead of like horizontally along the fretboard.
Yeah, some of those arpeggio lines that you sometimes play across, I mean, if you're having to move right the way up the 4-string, I mean, it'd be, well, you'd probably change the whole fingering, wouldn't you? Because it'd be just silly sometimes moving across it. That, it's kind of silly. But the thing I love is when you use the Piccolo strings, and because I've seen quite a few. At first, I didn't realize that you were using Piccolo strings. I thought it was because it sounds like an 8-string or something like that when you're using it, and I thought that you might have had some kind of effect on it almost. But then I noticed in the thing, in the description, that it was Piccolo strings. Do you use Piccolo strings a lot?
Yeah, a decent amount. For some reason, I haven't as much over like the last year or so, but definitely earlier on, I was using it a lot. It's really nice for solo stuff. I would say I don't end up using it as much when I'm doing more of like a full production with other instruments and stuff, but it can sound really nice for like ethereal tapping with a lot of reverb. And it's interesting how it doesn't sound, because a lot of people, the classic hate comment I got on Piccolo bass videos is, why aren't you just playing a guitar? Yeah. And which is like, I get what they're saying, but it sounds weirdly different to a guitar. And also the fact that it's only got 4 strings means I can have a detuner on every string, which on Piccolo bass, like playing a harmonic and then detuning it sounds so nice. It's like has this really heavenly quality to it. So yeah, I might do some more Piccolo stuff soon. I haven't done that for a while.
Yeah, it sounds great for the chordal tapping and harmonics. I mean, they just sound wicked. And
yeah,
I mean that. And when you were saying about using the detuner on some of those things, I mean that's the man ring thing, isn't it? I mean, he's god of that stuff. And it's. But the how long have you been playing 6-string? Were you playing that from the start as well, or was that something later?
No, 6-string I've only been playing for maybe 2 or 3 years. Definitely not that long, and I really like it. I mean, it's a beast. The 6-string basses are a beast, and they're heavy, but I do really like. I don't know. It opens up a lot of possibilities, especially in tapping. Like the thing about 4-string bass is that you can't really get the most colorful chords because you've only got 4 strings.
Yeah.
Which obviously means a maximum of 4 notes in the chord. Whereas with a 6-string, that's when you can start getting, some of the tensions in there as well, which can be really nice.
Yeah, especially if you tap them, because then you can fill them out down the bottom as well, yeah.
Exactly, you can get the whole chord.
Yeah, I'm terrible on 6-string. I've had a couple of them, but I really wish I could spend some time on the 6-string, but it's so big. It's like it's so huge.
It's like a ski or like a big sword or something, It's
yeah. The what was the other thing? Oh yeah, the whammy bar. So you've got that whammy bar thing that's on it. So what the hell is that?
Are you talking about the virtual on the 6-string?
Yeah, well you've got the. So there's the thing that I've seen where you're going like it's up here and you've got the boing boing thing.
Yeah,
boing boing thing.
Yeah.
So what's that one?
So that's really cool. I actually didn't know about it until a few months ago. Basically, it's a digital whammy. It's called Virtual Jeff Pro.
Virtual Jeff?
Yeah, like the name Jeff. I don't know why they called it that. It's a pretty hilarious name. And like in their tutorial videos, they just refer to it as Jeff. It's like you can put Jeff anywhere on your guitar. It's just so funny to think of this little thing as like this little guy called Jeff. But anyway, so someone recommended to me in the comments of one of my videos, because I uploaded a video with just like a normal whammy bar on my bass, which I got installed at Guitar Center. And someone said, you should check out digital whammies. Yeah, exactly. You should give Jeff a call. And I thought they were talking about like the Digitech whammy that you use your foot with, which those, I like them, but they sound very digital in my opinion. Like you can really tell that it's like a computerized type effect. This one, so then he said, no, you should try Virtual Jeff. I was like, okay. And I ordered one, and they sound really realistic for a digital whammy, and they're like almost instantaneous response as well. It's like you push it down, maybe there's like, I don't know, 1/10 of a second of lag or something, but it's really quick. And I really love the fact that I can have it like on the horn of the bass, because then it's like a lot more accessible for slap, because you're normally slapping kind of like
you don't want to be doing this,
you're not slapping like at the bridge. You're usually slapping pretty close to the fretboard, so then it's like way quicker to just like slap and then just like hit the whammy and go back to slapping. So yeah, I love that. It's become one of my favorite effects.
Do you know? Is it the norm to have it set up there on the horn, or can you just put them wherever you want?
So I've never seen a bassist use Virtual Jeff. So on their tutorials are always, guitarists, and they always just have them where a whammy usually is, like on the bridge. So I don't think it's normal to have it on the horn. I've never seen anyone else do that.
That's just a Charles Berthoud innovation then.
As far as I know, there might be someone else who does it, but I haven't seen them yet.
Hey, that'll be great if you start seeing different bass players now putting it on that horn. You'll be like, hey, there you go.
That would be funny, yeah.
My new big influence. Yeah. So also, you've the one thing that some people might not realise is that you've actually got, you've got albums out, solo bass albums that you can find on Spotify and places like that, and I guess you can buy them as well. Have you got a Bandcamp account as well?
No, I don't have Bandcamp. I do sell CDs online, and I sell, I have stuff on iTunes and Amazon and all of that. And then, of course, Spotify and Apple Music. Yeah. Yeah.
The first one that you did, it was, what's it called? It's the thingy of solo bass.
New Age of Solo Bass.
That's it. Yeah, I remember that's what, I said that I'd been listening to you quite a bit before all the, it happened. That was one of the ones that I remember hearing. And so is your latest one, is it Epiphany, the latest one?
That's my latest full album. I've released some singles on Spotify that are newer than that. But yeah, Epiphany is the latest full one. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you do you do any gigs doing those performances from those?
Since COVID, I've only done a couple of live shows, but before COVID, I did quite a lot of gigs. Epiphany wasn't released at that point, but I did all my stuff prior to that. I actually used to do street performances in Boston, like a few times a week during the summer.
I've seen some footage of those things. Yeah, they're around on YouTube, aren't they?
Yeah, I'm actually thinking about doing one or two of those this summer, maybe filming it, putting it on YouTube. I think that'd be cool.
Yeah, that'd be wicked.
Yeah. And also, I'm definitely going to try and start doing more live shows. Maybe, I don't know, maybe next year. I think the thing is, a lot has changed since all of this stuff on YouTube has happened. And I feel like I need to make sure my live show is like hitting on the same level as my YouTube videos. Because a lot of the stuff I was doing prior to all the stuff on YouTube, it was like, very small gigs, just sometimes playing in bars where everyone was like, what is this like solo bassist doing here? So I feel,
noise?
Yeah, exactly. So I think, I need to make sure that, my next live shows, I want them they're going to be very different from my live shows prior to the YouTube stuff happening. So, I do want to do it though. It's been a while, and it's really fun to connect with fans in real life as opposed to only on the internet.
Do you think, a lot of the stuff that you do obviously has got quite a lot of technical facility, and they're pretty tricky to play. Now, I'm guessing that because you wrote the things and you're playing them, that they probably fall under your fingers pretty well. But in terms of actually taking it from, let's say, the YouTube thing to actually playing it live, are there any kind of, are any of them the kind of things where you think, I don't know if I'd really want to play that one live, or are they all pretty good for live performance, do you think?
I'm trying to think. I think most of them would be good for live performance. I think the only ones that might be difficult are the ones where there's multiple complicated bass tracks where obviously I've recorded myself like 3 or 4 times, and that would be really hard to play live unless I had like 3 other bassists in my band.
Well, that's a good idea. That'd be cool, actually. Like,
that could be
Victor
cool.
Wooten and, get a bunch of dudes. That'd be wicked.
That would be fun. But other than that, I think they're all pretty playable live. I've played a lot of them. I played like when I was doing street performances before I put them on YouTube. And I think the question more would be if I'd be able to pull off an hour and a half set of just solo bass, because I'm thinking I might want to have a band, which I haven't had in the past. I used to do my shows completely solo. But I think now I would like to have a band to make it more dynamic. I've been doing stuff with, I don't know if you saw my latest collab I did with Bernd. He's an Austrian guitarist.
That was brilliant. Yeah.
Thanks. We've talked about maybe like teaming up, doing some live shows together, which I think would be really fun, where we would like potentially just, we'd do our own collabs together, but then also like our own solo stuff as well, which I think would like add some really cool variety to the set.
That would be wicked.
Yeah.
Now you mention it, I was just thinking about that, because like people like Stu Ham go out and they do stuff pretty much as a band. I think even when he was doing a lot of his like Kings of Sleep and all those albums, he'd go out with a band and, you know, because obviously it'd break things up, wouldn't it? Because then you could do the solo stuff in between. You could even dress up like, you know, do your Beethoven thing, do all that stuff.
Right, exactly. And or, you know, do some of the crazy stuff that we do in our videos, like do one where I'm playing with a bow or whatever.
It would. I think that'd be great because, like, I think now, like I said earlier, you know, it's the entertainment factor with solo bass. To me, it's just unbelievable that somebody like yourself is actually getting that audience, you know, like a non, you know, nerd bass player audience, you know, basically. And, you know, if you could, I mean, for the bass world as a whole, that would be so crazy to have somebody be able to go out there and do a full tour with a, you know, a band as well, but, you know, an entertaining thing. I mean, it kind of moves more into the kind of, not stand-up, it's not stand-up, but, you know, like more of a, that kind of thing. It's almost like a solo bass cabaret, something. It's kind of I don't know how to describe it, but it's got that kind of thing. You know, it's like, it's more than just solo bass, but solo bass at the heart of it. I think that'd be great. I'd pay to see that.
Yeah, no, I think that'd be really fun. Yeah, we've been talking about doing something like that, and just gotta try and make it happen now. I think it'd also be really cool to, because, you know, people on my channel, obviously, you know, they love what I'm doing now, but I think it'd be really cool for them to see me, you know, playing live as well, and I can, like, kind of make some videos where I'm, like, showing stuff behind the scenes, and I think it'd be cool for them to see that it doesn't just have to be on YouTube. Like, this is something that you can go and perform live as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you were to have any kind of audience participation, that could become a YouTube video in itself, couldn't it? You know,
exactly.
Things that you can do. That sounds wicked. But the other thing I was going to mention as well is, for anybody that didn't realise, you've actually got a tapping course out as well at SBL.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
How was that? Is it? I have seen that. It's you go from basics through to is it 3 parts? I think it is, isn't it? There's 3 parts to it.
Yeah. So it starts off very basic. It's designed to be accessible to anyone, assuming you have a bass. I guess that's the only requirement, is that, or at least you have access to a bass. But yeah, basically it starts off very simple. I tell you how to set up your bass. I tell you how to do basic tapping technique and show you some really simple exercises. And then it slowly works its way up. I teach you some, like, simple pieces, some simple tapping pieces that you can play. And then it moves on to, like, the more challenging exercises like scales. And I teach an etude, a tapping etude in there at one point. And then by the end, you're doing, like, independent stuff with each hand, which is that's where it starts getting really difficult. Is where your hands are not playing the exact same thing. It's like one hand is playing a melody, the other one's playing a walking bass line or something like that. That's the thing that bassists are not used to. Like, usually your right hand is playing the rhythm and your left hand is playing the notes. But tapping, you can have completely separate stuff happening in each hand, and it messes with your brain at first. But it's a cool thing to learn. And yeah, if you take that course, I'll take you through all of that.
And when you're tapping, how do you have your action set up? Have you got it pretty low?
Yeah, so basically the way I set up all my basses is I have them in a way that I can play any technique that I want. So yeah, usually it ends up being fairly low, but it's not the lowest I've ever seen. Like, I've definitely seen bassists who have their action lower than I do, but they generally don't do much aggressive playing. Like, they're usually just doing fingerstyle, pretty soft touch. I find that if I get it too low, then I can't really slap that hard, and sometimes even
Frets
tapping.
out, yeah.
Exactly. Sometimes even tapping gets a little bit buzzy if the action's too low. I don't really know what it is in terms of like millimeters or anything like that.
No.
But I basically just lower it as much as I can go, and then like try slapping it fairly hard. And if it's buzzy, I push it up a bit and just try and get like an equilibrium like that.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
All right, then. So I don't even have... Normally, I would say at this point, where can we find you and where's all your social media? Well, I'm pretty sure that most people know exactly where you are. So, yeah. Just look on YouTube. Look out for Charles, the pro. So that was brilliant, Charles. That's fantastic. It's been lovely to talk to you.
Yeah, you too. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's been really fun.